welcome back to English Champion. On this episode, I want to talk about school administrators. As someone who has taught at all levels from elementary school all the way up through four-year university, various types of universities, I've met a lot of administrators in my day, and some have been pretty good. Some have not been very good, but if you follow me here on Substack or on Twitter or LinkedIn, you see that I talk about administration quite often. And I've even gotten comments that say, "Wow, you're really tough on administrators. Why is that? Why are you so, why do you pick on them so much?" And I'm going to offer a few reasons why that is, but I'm going to make it positive today. I'm going to tell you the story of the best administrator I ever worked for, and so that you can see how it's properly done, and you can decide for yourselves if the people that you work for perform their job that way, or if you think you want to become an administrator someday, you can act this way in that role as well. So I'm going to cover both sides, but I am going to end on a positive note about administrators today. All right. So first, why I'm often quite tough on administrators, and this is nothing to the niceness or friendliness of all these people. Again, I've worked for dozens over my many years as a teacher, and being a department chair, I've had to deal with upper levels of administration for a long time. And so, it's not like I have anything personal necessarily against any of those people. They've all been, friendly and polite and all of that. But just in general, when you're dealing with administration, there can be a clash between administrators and faculty, and there are a few reasons for that. One that I've noticed over my many years is that there can tend to be, not all positions are like this, but in some levels of especially the university experience, there can be people in administrative positions who don't have any experience with teaching. They don't understand academics. That's not always the case. Many people have been a professor for a long time and then they become some kind of administrator, and that's pretty normal. But there are many instances where people come in to work for universities that really have no experience with anything related to academia. And it's understandable why they do that. They think, well, at a certain level, a university is kind of like a business. You got to have money and you got to pay your bills and all that stuff. And so you don't need an academic mind to run this place. But that's really a bad way of thinking of it, because you need people who understand what the classroom experience is like and what teachers' lives are like when they're dealing with all these kids, or if at the lower levels you're dealing with their parents. And if you don't have any understanding of that, you're going to run your school in a way that doesn't respect the day-to-day nuances of what academia really is. You're just looking at things like items on a spreadsheet. You don't understand the people involved, and that can create a lot of conflict. So whether it's no experience, or what's actually pretty common is very little experience, there are lots of people who will teach for 3 or 4 years, go get their upper level degrees, and and it's usually in something like educational development or educational leadership, or something like these vague things that aren't scholarly fields. But they get their master's, and so now I can be an administrator, something in management or whatever. It's like, it's not scholarly at all. And yet you think you want to run a school. So you get very young people who realize after 3 years, they're like, oh, classroom is not very fun. I still want to be in a school and have the cushy schedule, but I want to make a lot more money and not have to deal with all these kids as much. So I'll be a principal. Or at the higher levels, I'll start working my way up to become some sort of dean or something like that. So again, you get people who have either no experience, they don't understand the scholarly component of the world of academia, or they just don't have classroom experience. They don't have the people part of academia down, or they just have very little. They did it for a little while and they quickly got out. They're like, this isn't for me. I want to go make more money, and so I can be an administrator. So it's the experience part that can cause some clashes between faculty and administrators. A second one is many administrators are just not very helpful to teachers. I understand they have to look at the school environment in a different way. But for those who were teachers and then become administrators, it's always so weird. Like, you are one of us. Like, you know the struggles we're going through. How about you help us out? Now that you're in a leadership role, help us. Help us with the budget. Help us with staffing. Help us with some sort of, resources and the development of our academic community here. Instead of just pushing papers around and saying no to everything. That's what tends to happen is people go into administration and then they get to boss people around and we ask for help and you don't give it to us because we're struggling. We have all these problems with our students and all that. And so, yeah, there's just a gap. There's a divide between administration. And again, if you don't know what it's like or don't care what it's like for the teachers, you just sit up here and go, nope, we can't do that. Sorry, figure it out on your own. And then the teachers are stuck, with again, minimal resources or lack of time or whatever it is, not enough staff, whatever. And it just doesn't seem like you care very much. So again, if you're inexperienced, you don't know, or then for whatever reason, people go into administration and forget what it was like to be a teacher and the problems that come with that. And so just not very helpful. I've kind of already mentioned it, but then there's the third part, which is the incredible salary that many of these people get without having to do the dirty work of what real education is. Again, you get to sit behind a desk and you get to sit, in your big cushy office and you make your 6-figure salary while we're the ones grading papers. We're the ones meeting with parents. We're the ones having to design curriculum. We're the ones having to do research and publish in our scholarly field so that we stay current and we want to be contributors to our field. Like, you don't have to do any of that. And yet somehow you're making more than we are. And in many cases, especially at the university level, at the lower levels, usually a teacher might only have a bachelor's, but to be an administrator, maybe have a master's or maybe even a PhD. But the university level, you'll have people like me with PhDs, and there's administrators who don't have any of those degrees. It's like, yeah, but you don't know anything about the scholarly work that we do. And yet you make, I've worked at schools where the administrators made 3 times as much as the faculty and didn't have to do any of the dirty work that we have to do. I've worked for an administrator who made 6 times what the faculty made. And, or sorry, not 6 times, 12 times. Sorry, that was a different situation. I've worked for one person who made 12 times what the faculty makes. It's like, but you don't, and my degree is higher than his is. Like, and he doesn't know anything about any of the things we do. Yet somehow that's the disparity. So that's another point of friction between faculty and administrators is the huge jump in salary for what exactly? You're not doing all the things that actual education really is. Education is teaching, mentoring young people, designing instructional methods to help kids, to help people get into their careers. You don't do any of that, and yet you make more money, like way more money, not just a little bit more, which we could go, okay, yeah, fine. You have a couple other responsibilities. Okay, fine. You can make 20 grand more. No, you're making hundreds and hundreds of thousands while we're doing the dirty work, and you don't have to do any of that. So salary is a part of it. And then also there's a lot of, I'm sure this happens at all the levels, again, elementary through college. It's especially bad at college, but it also happens in every other industry, I'm sure, as well. But in admin, there's a lot of suck up culture, tons of brown nosing. Like, everyone thinks everyone's amazing. And it's so bad that there's, in my many years of being a faculty member, we'd have conversations behind closed doors about the administration where it's like, can you believe that he said that in the meeting the other day? He doesn't even know what he's talking about. Or can you believe they implemented that policy for our school? That's going to wreck our students and it's going to create all sorts of problems in the classroom, or, whatever it might be, some complaint that we're all having. And then literally the very next week in some meeting, that same person who is in my office making a complaint will stand up and say, aren't we so fortunate to have this person, this administrator, leading our school or leading our department or whatever. And we're so grateful for your wisdom and for your guidance and all this stuff. I'm like, you were literally just talking to me about how much you thought that person was an idiot. And now, why are you doing that? Well, it's because that person wants to move up and wants to be thought of well by that person so that then they can become administrators too. So that's what happens. Again, that probably happens at every kind of company, but it's really bad in education where there is this rush for status that everyone wants to have a title on their name. They want to be a dean, they want to be a vice president, they want to be a chief officer of something. And so all these titles get thrown around. And so everyone rushes to suck up to the whoever's ahead of them. And they want to go to the next level too. Because again, you make a lot more money, which means you don't have to be in the classroom, which means you get to just push paper around the desk and make, six-figure salary. So lots of brown nosing in the education administration world. And I want no part of it. I don't suck up to anybody. And so maybe that's a reason that no one's ever thought of me as being an administrator. But I've never wanted to be and never will ever do that. And I'll tell you more about that at the end of this episode. But to that last point, to the brown nosing stuff, you just got to be very careful of in any walk of life. It's especially true in politics, could be true at certain businesses, but it's definitely true at education as well, where you just have to be very careful of people who are, you might call it ambition. I would call it like just desperation, that you so badly want to be in charge of people. That's kind of what administration is. Like you think so highly of yourself that you want to have dominion over all of these people, even though you don't know anything about what they do. Yet you think you want to be their boss. It's just very like middle management type thinking. Like you think you want to boss people around. That's what that is. So again, in all walks of life, be very careful of anyone who says, I want to be the boss of that. Unless it's your very specific domain, like you need to avoid those people because 95% of them are out to be some kind of tyrant, like or a dictator, like they just want to be in charge of stuff. And those are usually people who shouldn't be in charge of stuff. I always wanted to be in charge of my own department, and so I was, but that was my department over my specific subject area. Why? Because I'm the expert in my subject area. So, if you want to control your tiny little domain, you should want to do that because you should want to influence how your thing operates. But when people want to be in charge of things that are outside of their domain, those are scary people. You want to kind of avoid them because it takes some very special qualities to not turn into a dictator. So yeah. All the like desperation to be middle managers, that's academic education administration for you. What's weird, this is something that surprised me, was most of education is very liberal, of course, and so it makes sense at most institutions for the administration to keep growing because that's what government is. Government just always grows itself. Government doesn't care about the people. Government cares about government, and so whenever administrators get in power, they want to make more administrators or they want to grab more power for themselves. And so that's very common at the university level, especially. And again, there's kind of a progressive political mentality to that. But it's not just them. What I also learned is at various places that actually had conservatives in leadership positions, they function the same way, which surprised me because you would think it'd be the opposite. If you're a true conservative, conservatives think, let the people make their own decisions. Give the lowest levels of influence the most power, so to speak. Like let them have control over their domain because they're the experts. Let them do it. And that's not the case at all. I've worked at places that were actually conservative in nature, and yet they did the same thing. It was all a power grab. It was complete centralization. No separation of powers. It was the growth of administration. Like we need more people with more titles. It's like we need more teachers. That's what we need. We don't need more vice presidents. We don't need more chief executive yada yadas, whatever. We don't need more deans. We need more teachers. We need more people to help the kids. That's who we need. And instead, we just had this giant, ever evolving growth of administration. And so yeah, it's just like politics. It doesn't matter who's in power. It doesn't matter if there's a Republican president. Look at Donald Trump, drain the swamp. No, he grew the government last time he was in office. We'll see if he does. We'll see if he sticks to it this time. Who knows? But George Bush massively grew government. Barack Obama grew government. Joe Biden grew government. They all just grow administration. Doesn't matter whether it's politics or academics. It's all the same. People who want power want more power. That's what it is. So education is the same. And that really surprised me because I wanted to work in more, want to find the little niches of conservatism in education. And when I thought I found it, I was like, oh, you're just like everyone else. You're the same as the other universities I worked for. You're just power hungry and want all the control for yourself and not trusting the people who actually know what they're doing. So sort of a political parallel too, which can be pretty dangerous because just like in government, you get a bunch of people with power who don't actually know what they're doing. So you got to be very careful. So those are all the reasons why for all my 25 years of being in education, I've been very skeptical of administrators. And again, many of them, all of them, if you meet them, they're very nice, friendly. I have no problems with them necessarily personally, most of them. But in the professional environment, like there's just a lot of problems. And I would say, I've butted heads with, or most teachers probably butt heads with probably 90% of administrators for all the reasons I just listed. And there are 10% who are pretty good, who perform their roles properly and are respected and people are devoted to them and their leadership and it is great. So I want to tell you about one of those that I've worked for. So again, they are out there. I'm not saying all administrators are bad. I'm just saying don't trust most of them. But I've worked for several who are quite good. I worked for two for a couple of years. I didn't work for them as long, but they were both great gentlemen, very good mentors. I respected them a lot. And then the person who came after them was who I worked for, I think, the longest. And so I'm going to just talk about him for 1 second here. And he was such an interesting guy because he and I could not be more different. And again, best boss I ever worked for. He was about my dad's age, so 25 years older than me. So it's not like we would be buddies or something out in the real world or anything like that. Much older than I was, and he was from either Queens or the Bronx. I can't remember where in New York City, but he's from New York City. That's where he grew up. Whereas I grew up in the farm and factory towns of Indiana. So totally different upbringings. His kind of academic background was different than mine. His was more business and actually ministry oriented, whereas mine's in English. And again, expert in English here. He grew up speaking Spanish, so he struggled with English as a young person. So we're totally different types of people, and yet he was the best boss I ever worked for several key reasons. And so that's what I want to give you here as some advice for administration here today. One thing he did that was so great, and I would assume he did it with everybody, but I definitely noticed he did it with me, was he constantly checked in with me. He would come knock on my door to my office, maybe every 2 weeks. If things got crazy, maybe it would just be once a month, but right around 2 weeks, he would pop in, knock on my door and say, "Hey, how's it going? Can we chat?" And I'd say, "Sure." And we would just catch up on sometimes personal things. I'm not really a personal person at work. I leave work is for work. I don't bring in stuff. I don't have photos of my family around my office or anything like that. I don't mind those who do, but I keep the work at work and I keep my home life at my home. And but we would have conversations. He'd ask how my wife was doing or something like how's her business going and stuff like that. I'd ask about his wife and how his kids are doing. We would do that, but it would also be professional. Like it would be a lot of, "Hey, what are you working on? What are you researching right now? What are you writing? What kind of what publishing are you trying to do right now?" And that wasn't even required. He knew that's what I often did in my free time, and so he'd ask about it. He was genuinely interested in the stuff that I do, even though he had no background in English at all, the field of English. he was genuinely interested in what I was working on, and he would constantly ask, "What can I do to help you? What can I do to make your job not necessarily easier, but more effective? How can I help you be a better teacher, a better scholar, whatever I was working on? How can I help?" It was constant helpfulness. And so that checking in, and again, it's not like I don't usually like people, you know, constantly, I don't need the constant updates with people. I prefer if we have something to talk about, okay, let's talk about it. But with him, it was out of genuine interest, and I really appreciated that because being an English teacher is not easy. There's a lot of reading, it's a lot of grading, it's a lot of writing, a lot of researching, and he really cared that I was doing those things, and so it was very helpful. And just he wanted not a buddy buddy relationship, but a great working relationship with his employees, and I really appreciated that. And when he left, the person who took his place did none of that. My office was literally 20 feet from this new administrator, and we had one conversation. We had a meeting. We were going over a proposal for something in the future, and so he and I had a chat for a while, like a half hour meeting or whatever. After that meeting, I never spoke to him. He never spoke to me again. For the next year, my office is 20 feet away. For a year, he never came to my office, never said hello. I never saw him. So that's the difference between someone who popped into my office every 2 weeks to check up on how I was doing and what things he could help me with versus someone who might only talk to you if you have a specific meeting with him. And then after that, you're of no use. I'm not interested in you. So that's the difference. That's an administrator who earns respect versus one who absolutely doesn't care about teachers. That's one area. Just being involved and asking good questions and being personable and just constantly wanting to help. That's what this boss did for me, and I really appreciated it. Number two, kind of along that line, wanting other people to be successful. He would try his best to give us resources, to give us opportunities where we could shine and be successful. And then when we did, he gave us the credit for it. Again, I've known other administrators who, when the school does something or a department does something, the bosses above get the credit for it. And that's very disheartening when us lower level people do the dirty work and then someone else above, not that we're out there doing things to seek credit. We're doing things because we want things to be good and we want to help kids and we want to improve our field of study and all that stuff. It's not to get glory or anything, but when something becomes successful and then someone else gets recognized for it, it's a little, it's not very nice. But he would always be the first to say, no, those guys did great. That teacher was awesome. Look at this program they started. It's great. Here's how the students are benefiting. He would constantly pass the praise down to the people who did it. And even if it was something he did, it was his idea that he implemented, he would talk about the lower level people, us regular faculty. That was just very generous. And again, wanting other people to be successful. When I got my first book published and I went and I told him about it, like he got choked up about it. He was so proud of me that one of his teachers, one of the people that he looks out for, was doing this really important scholarly work that was challenging the culture in a positive way. Like he got more excited about it than even I was. I mean, I was glad. I was kind of just relieved that it was done with it. I had finally gotten it published, but he was so happy for me. And immediately, I offered to give him a book because I had a free copy and I was like, here, let me give this to you. And he's like, no, I want to buy one from you. So he spent all the money on those first edition books. That when academic publishing, it's very expensive. And so he bought one and used to have it on his shelf with all his other scholarly books. He'd have my book on his shelf because he respected my work so much. And so, again, just wanting other people to be successful, it was a great trait, and it made all of us, his faculty, really respect him. Third, he listened to the experts. If there was something we needed to do related to English, he asked me to take the lead on it because I'm the expert in that field. If it was something with science, he went to the science people. If it was something with the math department, he went to the math people. He's like, you're the expert. You tell me, what should we be doing? Even though he was the boss, he didn't hand things down in a top-down way. He gathered the information from the bottom and then took it where it needed to go. If it needed to go to the higher levels up, then he did that. But it always came through us. And so, again, in contrast, after he left, the administrators I then worked for constantly just implemented their own things and then told the faculty, you have to do this. It's like, yeah, but you didn't even ask my opinion, and like that affects my field. Don't you want to know what my field would think about this? Nope, here's what we're doing now. Do it. So it's like people who aren't experts at this thing telling you what to do, not cool. Whereas he never did that. He got the input from the people at the ground level, like a general who goes and asks the soldiers, hey, what's the front line look like? What do you think? What would be a good idea here? He may not use it, but he would ask and get our advice. And that's what good leaders do, is they seek out the people closest to the action, the people with the boots on the ground. Those are the teachers in the classroom, and they want our opinion first. And again, I've worked for some administrators who never ask for faculty opinion. They think they have all the ideas. They're the smartest people in the room, and they'll just tell people what to do. Again, that's that kind of dictator mindset. Like, you only wanted that job so that you could just boss people around. Good leaders get the advice from the people below them and then figure out a good way of implementing it. And that's what he did. And again, all of us faculty respected him for that a lot. You might think that I liked him so much because, I had ideas and he would use them. And so I felt like I was important or something like that. And that's not true at all. I had a million ideas because I constantly see things that could be better. And I would take ideas to him all the time. And a lot of times he'd use them. And I really appreciated that. And a lot of times he wouldn't. He would say, yeah, it's a good idea. I don't think I can do it right now. Give me a year to work on some other things. And then I think we'll be in a better position. Maybe that'll work then. And I would get frustrated because I want things done now and, all that. Or he would say, no, we can't do that because this, and this. And I wouldn't necessarily agree with all that, but I would at least understand and appreciate that he had a valid reason for disagreeing with me and or with the other faculty, because, it wasn't just me. We could all take ideas to him. And so yeah, it's not like we had a number of disagreements where I got frustrated with him or he got frustrated with me, but it was the ability to explain yourself and say, look, I'm on your side and here's why that's a good idea, but I just can't do that. Instead of either just ignoring you or never even asking in the first place. Again, I've worked for other subsequent people who either didn't listen at all or it's just a flat, nope, we can't do that. No consideration, no reflection. Again, the inability to have disagreements and still be like respectful and like you feel like you want to keep bringing them ideas, because that's how it was, where he might shoot down one of my ideas, but I know, you know what, I'll come up with a better one. And 2 weeks from now, I'm going to go talk to him about a new idea and he will still listen. Whereas with other administrators, once they say, no, I can't do that, and they don't really have good reasons, then it's not long before you go, oh, they're not going to listen to anything I have to say. So it doesn't matter what I bring them. They're not going to listen to me because they don't respect the teachers. They just want to do administrative things. They want to do things in their big fancy office and don't care about us. And so after a while, you stop giving input, and that's when everything suffers, because you should want to work in a business or any environment where there's freedom of exchange of ideas, because if you have the right people on the team, everyone wants to make it better. And so when you shut people out like that, the whole enterprise is going to suffer, and that's what ended up happening. The reason you could trust them when they would say no is, to my fifth point here, is I always trusted this dean of mine to dean/academic vice president of mine to always have the proper vision and to have the proper values for what we were aiming at. And so I knew that even if I had an idea or I took a problem to him and he didn't do anything about it or whatever, I knew that we were still on the same page. And I knew he wasn't just blowing me off, or that, you know, he was now pursuing a different goal than what I was. We would always be pointing in the same direction. And I was always confident with that because we would talk about it that, nope, this is still our mission. Here are our standards. We're still focusing on this. Here's what we believe in. And so even if we disputed some of the sort of tactical parts, we knew the big strategy overall was still in the right direction. And so working for someone who didn't compromise on values, maintained the proper standards, did what was right all the time, at least as far as I knew, that's who you want to work for. And so I was very fortunate to work for this gentleman for a number of years. And I was very saddened to see him leave. And so were many of us. So saddened, in fact, that when he ended up leaving, several of us faculty also left too. And so, because I can't speak for the other faculty, but I didn't want to work for anyone else. He was the best boss. And as I said, the next boss who came in was not good. Didn't respect faculty. Again, part of the suck up culture, like constantly brown nosed to the other administrators. Didn't have a lot of experience in the classroom. Jumped into administration immediately. All the qualities I talked about before, this new person had, and again, didn't even bother to talk to us. It was pretty crazy. In fact, here's a difference. A little short anecdote. Again, my previous boss would come find us and genuinely want to know how we were doing. The new boss came in, and his thing was, hey, if anyone wants to talk to me, make an appointment with my secretary, and I'll meet with you I'll have coffee with you. Just let me know. And all of us faculty went, wait, what? If we feel like we want to talk to the boss, if we want to have the privilege of talking to the man in charge, then he would have his secretary, etch out a few minutes for us to have coffee. Like, the arrogance and the level of like condescension that you think you're so important that we should all be begging to sign up to have a meeting with you. That was the difference. Instead of the boss coming to talk to us because he cared about us, that person said, you should care about me so much that you should want to come have coffee with me, and my secretary will slate you in. That was the difference. And again, adding on to the fact that the person didn't even speak to me for a year, even though my office was literally right down the hall. Like totally uncaring. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to work for that person. So I stopped working for that person. So that's how important a good education administrator is. And again, there are some out there. I worked for him. The two gentlemen who preceded him were also great. Again, I just didn't work for them as long, but they were great men too. They can make or break the environment. They really can. There's the cliche that people don't leave jobs. They don't leave bad jobs. They leave bad bosses. And that's pretty true. I didn't quit my university position because I disliked the job. I loved the job. I left because of the bosses. I could not work for them anymore. The administration was so bad that I couldn't do it. So when you have good administrators, they are very precious because there are not many of them around. So be careful when you see words like dean and vice president and again, chief officer and all these fancy titles. These are, 90 to 95% of the time, these are people completely disconnected. They're only in it for the fancy salary, for the fancy title, for the fancy office. They're not in it for the education part of it. They like to be called dean. They like to be called vice president or president, or chief executive or whatever. And I got into education for education. And that's the difference. And it's why I'll never be an administrator. I want no part of any of that because I care about teaching. I care about kids. I care about my field of study. I care about the scholarship. And the majority of those people just don't. So that's the way it is. One final note on that. I think the reason I feel that way is because that's how my dad is. My dad's my hero for a million different reasons, but one of them, from a professional standpoint, is he's been a professor for, over 35 years, and he's been the highest ranking professor at his university for a long time, and so in many instances, he's been asked to be part of the leadership of the school, or he could have applied to be a vice president or something at another school. Almost every year people would ask, "Hey, there's this new VP position opening. Would you take it? You're the most senior person here. Will you please, take on this job?" And he's always like, "Nope, I want no part of that." Many years ago, he took on the role of dean because I think they literally the year was about to start and they hadn't filled it. They could not find the right person, and they, in desperation, came to him and said, "Will you please be the dean over like all these big programs?" And they knew he hated all that, and so he'd been the chair, like I'd been the chair of English. He'd been the chair of his department for many years, so he controls, or he was influential in his own field. But telling other departments what to do, like, he wants no part of that. And because they were desperate, he was like, and because he serves, he cares about service, he said, "Okay, I'll do it." I think he said, "I'll do it for 2 years, and then I'm out. You got to fix this problem in 2 years, because then I'm going back to the classroom. I'm not doing this anymore." And so that's what he did. And so his whole life, out of almost 40 years in higher education, there were only 2 years where he was, an administrator as a dean. And he did it reluctantly and immediately gave up control because he doesn't want the power over all those other fields and the stupid paperwork and meetings and all that nonsense that has nothing to do with teaching. And so because he's a man of principle who stuck to his values of what he believes in, which is helping kids, passing on the truth of his field, doing scholarly research, that's what matters in education. And so that's I think that's why I feel the way I feel too. And so I'll never be an administrator either. So like I said, I'm tough on administrators because of all the reasons I started with. And gosh, their salaries are just so insane. I can't believe it when the people on the ground level don't get that recognition. It's just very frustrating. So, but it doesn't mean it's everybody. Again, I've worked for a number of very good administrators. There are some of them out there. You got to be careful of them, but there are a few. And when you have those few that the faculty truly respect, that school needs to hang on to them as tightly as they can, because there aren't many. So a little bit of a positive note. I do like some administrators. I know many of you think I don't. There are some I do like. And this gentleman I described, he was the model administrator for me. And so I really respect him, still do, even though he's not my boss anymore. And hopefully you teachers out there can find an administrator like that. Or if you think you want to become an administrator, that's the type of one that you aim to become. See you next time.